माननीय श्री अमर पटनायक जी।
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Chairman, ma'am. Ma'am, I would like to, first of all, congratulate the government and the Honorable Finance Minister, she's not here, for the kind of direction that has come to the economy, which is reflected in the last quarterly result of the GDP. 7.6% in the July-September quarter of financial year 24, beating all expectations by all the rating agencies. I'm also happy by the fact that under the leadership of our Chief Minister Naveen Patnaik, our state also has been beating the national growth rate consistently for the last 10 years. The trajectory of growth that has been set in motion by the government during the last 5 or 6 budget, particular emphasis on capital expenditure, I think is in the right direction. The policy push has been reflected in the consistent economic growth. Now I would like to draw attention, ma'am, to a few of the global economies, how they have fared during this period, because that would set the context for how Indian economy has performed during this period. 2022 GDP growth figures, India 7.2%, IMF, I'm quoting the IMF figures, China 3%, UK 4.1%, US 2.1%, Germany 1.8%, IMF's projected GDP growth rate for India 2023 is 6.3%. If we go by what has happened today, I think we are going in the right direction, would probably be beating that particular projection. Now, I have heard from the opposition benches here, from many of my colleagues have said about a number of things that India should have been doing, India should have been achieving. But for all that, we need the GDP to grow, and that is what is happening. So I think the thrust of this current debate that we are having under this short duration discussion is where are we as far as the Indian economy is concerned. I think we are in good wicket, on a strong wicket. But having said so, I would like to also say, I would like to state that if we look into the granular details of what has spurred this growth and what has to be done further, I think it is important, because what I'm going to say now is that we are in a very nice position to bring in structural changes in the economy. We are going in that direction. Over-reliance on private consumption expenditure to shift towards an investment-oriented growth strategy is, I think, a step in the right direction. But for that, the policy push has to be stable and consistent. Now, let me look at the real gross value added. Real gross value added, because that indicates the actual value addition that has taken place in the economy. Now, that is the latest figures I'm taking. Here there are some concerns, and therefore my suggestion to the Treasury benches would be just to somehow ensure that these fault lines are addressed. Agriculture, forestry and fishing. If we look at the figures from 2019 onwards, ma'am, it has consistently decreased. Agriculture, forestry, fishing, it has consistently declined. It has come to 1.22% in 2023. Now, this is a cause of worry, because food security, whatever said and done, is, I think, one of the most important requirements of a growing economy and a growing population. Agriculture, allied sectors has seen this steady decline from 4.3%. It grew during the pandemic years, which made us survive the pandemic, to 1.2%. And what it calls for is investment in agriculture, and therefore the government came with the Agriculture Infrastructure Fund. However, against a projection of 1 lakh crore spending in agriculture sector under this particular scheme, only 26,000 crores have been sanctioned and 21,000 has been spent. I think a lot is to be done in the rural sector. The Swaminathan Committee report, which has been talked about for increasing the income of the farmers, fixing the minimum support price, is yet to be done based on the C2, that is the composite price, which has been the consistent demand of our party, Biju Janata Dal, our Chief Minister Naveen Patnaik, and we have been saying it in all fora. Now, that has not happened. That has to happen. the deceleration in the agricultural sector translates into some stress in the rural sector. And this has to be recognized because rural economy has to go up in case we have to maintain this growth momentum, and the structural shift remains where it is and it doesn't frequently change its position year on year. Now, if we come to the services, the growth rate in the services has come down to 5.8%, and this is a deceleration. Previously, our economy was heavily dependent on services. But if the services come down, and particularly trade, hotels, transport, communication, broadcasting services, it has just grown by 4%. Now, these are the sectors which provide jobs. Now, unless we can grow in these sectors by consistent policy efforts, by budgetary allocation, by increasing private investment in these sectors, jobs will not be created, and the unemployment problem will consistently haunt us. And therefore, I think this is something which the government has to think about. The other point that I wanted to talk about is on the social sector, ma'am. Ma'am, in the social sector, the last economic survey said that out-of-pocket expenses are 48%. Now, this has to decrease, and therefore, expenditure on health has to increase. Now, this has not happened. This has to be consistently made, given the fact that our economy is growing at a healthy rate. So, madam, the growth of the economy, Indian economy, depends on the growth of the state economies. Now, the growth of the state economies can increase only when the central allocation by way of devolution of funds increases. What we have seen is that this has consistently decreased and currently at about 30%, which I think is not doing good to the economic situation in the states. We have to ensure that the regional imbalance that exists between several states in terms of attracting foreign investment because of the infrastructure which is already there. Now, that has to be addressed by either declaring special focus state to some of the states like Orissa or Andhra Pradesh, or making an infra push in these sectors which will actually lift them to a level in which foreign direct investment can also come into these sectors. Ma'am, there is a point that I wanted to make relating to tax to GDP ratio. Tax to GDP ratio had shown a good trend recently. The GST collection has increased, which basically means that formalization of the economy is taking place. But at the same time, 90% of the people are still employed in informal economy. Now, this is a contradiction which I think the government has to address at some point of time, because unless this is addressed, a structural problem may still remain in the economy even as we are growing in GDP terms. Ma'am, the tax to GDP ratio at 11.1% is at par with 2020-23 revised estimates, but it is less than the average of many emerging economies, including the OECD economies, where it is 33%. So we have to bring this structural change in our economy in terms of revenue collection, tax as a percentage of GDP. The last point, ma'am, I want to make is relating to private sector investment. The investment that has already happened, which is spurring this economic growth, which our economic analysts are also saying is basically backed by government's emphasis on capital expenditure, which is welcome. But this capital expenditure has to be backed by private sector investment from the private sector in the economy. The household sector's investment in the economy is already happening, but the private sector's investment is not happening. This is a cause for worry, and for that, I think several more policy push have to be made, because this would be another source in which jobs can be created, employment opportunities can be created, and unemployment can be addressed. Lastly, madam, there was a talk about female labor force participation. Ma'am, last point, female labor force participation. There was a discussion as to the stark reality of our female labor force participation being very low compared to other countries. But ma'am, just a point that actually there is an increase in female labor force participation thanks to the government by 37% in 2023. Several such measures will have to be taken to bring it to a level in which we can be comparable to other countries. So overall, in short, ma'am, I would like to say that economy is in good hands, but there are fault lines. These fault lines have to be addressed. And if that happens, then the country's growth trajectory will be more inclusive, more sustainable, and it will benefit all sections of society. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you. Manya Sansad Shri Ayodhya Rami Reddy Alaji.